Retirement Act, changes provisions relating to participation in the school employees retirement system in the state of Nebraska, harmonize provisions and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 104, introduced by Senator McDonald's bill for enacting retirement, amends several sections, redefines terms under the County Employee Retirement Act, the Judges Retirement Act, the School Employee Retirement Act, the Nebraska State Patrol Retirement Act, and the State Employees Retirement Act, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 105, introduced by Senator McDonald's bill for enacting retirement, amends sections 23-2301 and sections 24-701 and several other sections. Change provisions relating to applicability of military service, eliminates the term harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, and declares an emergency. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Next item on the agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Albright would move to approve the following final Committee on Committees report.
Senator Albright, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our report from Committee on Committee, the first thing I'd like to do is to thank all the members of the caucus that represented their caucuses, which would be the first caucus are Senators Bosar, Bosselman, Mosier, and Sanders. The second caucus was Senator Hunt, Linehan, Vargas, and Von Gillerin. Caucus 3 was Senators Erdman, Jacobson, Lowe, and Merman. I'd like to talk about the procedure so that not only we as a body understand it, but also the public. It's important that we follow the rules. That was my task. My task was certainly not to place people in different spots. Mine was to conduct the meeting. So if you'll turn, if you would like, to page 13 in the rules of the Nebraska Unicameral Legislature. Rule 3 is committees. Section 2, the appointments of the committees. I'm going to go down to Section B. Immediately following chairmanships, a committee on committee membership election, the committee shall meet and, by majority vote of all of its members, submit to the legislature a preliminary report of the appointments to the remaining standing and select committees, each with the number of members as hereinafter set forth unless otherwise provided by rule or by statute. On the following day, the committee meets and they shall, again, they say shall, not may, but shall meet and by a majority vote of all of its members submit to the legislature a final report for its approval, appointments to standing committees and select committees, each with a number of members and set forth unless otherwise provided by rule or state statute. So once the final report is presented to the legislature, no amendments shall be considered. If the legislature by majority of the elected members fails to adopt the final report of the Committee on Committees, such report shall be returned to the committee for further action. Okay, so I wanted to go through what we did these last 2 days. The preliminary report that you were given on that first day represented filling each and every slot on each committee. The reason that we go in numerical order, once we recognize who the chairs were, that's the basis for where everyone's going to sit. It may change the makeup of a committee if a chair isn't the same as what it was the year before. It's important that every part of the state is represented on each of these committees. The process is very much caucus driven. Everybody was trying to come to me and say, hey, I want to go here, I want to go there. I just directed them back to their caucus. Their caucus leaders were the ones that were helping put these lists together. So as chair, again, of the committee, I'm tasked to bring the 3 caucuses together with their 4 members. They're tasked to bring to the table who will serve on each committee for their constituents. With that said, we did have a situation on a few placements, both days, both the first day and the second. So the caucus, when that starts to happen, they ask for a break. And maybe caucus 2 meets with caucus 3, or caucus 1 meets with caucus 2, and they work it out, and then we reconvene. Anytime there was a situation like that, the break was taken. When we reconvened, we were able to have a preliminary slate completed, and it was approved unanimously by the committee. The clerk's office would have or did post it on the website and email it to every senator for review. On the floor the next day, we had an executive meeting to vote Vice Chair Senator Lowe in. He was selected and elected by 12 yes votes and 1 abstention. I announced on the floor that morning, yesterday, that the senators had until noon to visit and express their desires to change committees with their 4 caucus representatives. We then met after the adjournment yesterday to finalize the slate. In the opening meeting, there were concerns about the process not being followed. After some discussion, a break was taken for phone calls to be made and caucuses to discuss changes. When we reconvened, we voted to consider the preliminary report. Senator Hunt moved that there was not a second to adopt the preliminary report. Senator Jacobson made a motion to amend the preliminary report and make 3 changes, which were moving Senator Slama to Natural Resource, Senator Holdcroft to Judiciary, and Senator Aguilar to Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs. It was seconded by Senator Lowe. Roll call was taken, and it was voted by a 12 yeses and 1 no. Again, I'd like to thank all senators for their participation and the committee caucus chairs for their work on the committee. And that's my report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Albrecht. Senator Wayne, I recognize Senator Wayne to begin the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, there's going to probably be some noise and some things talked about today, but I'm going to tell you my request. And with that request, I will tell you my commitment. My request is as Judiciary Chair, we are facing not just probably building 1 prison, but most likely having a budget for 2. I've said publicly that I've been against the prison, but if you recall 2 years ago during the budget debate, there's no option, we're going to have to build 1. But what we did in that budget debate, we set aside $15 million for programming. My position has been we have to do something, but we have to make sure we have programming and prison reform a part of the process. That's still my commitment. Part of that prison reform and criminal justice reform, that if you read Governor Pillen's conversations about this, is a definite need for mental health and transitional living and transitioning back to society. I made a request that Senator Frederickson come over to Judiciary, and that request, for whatever reason, got lost in the weeds in this conversation. I'm asking you to either do a motion to, and I may do a motion to recommit, or to vote this down, because the background that is needed around mental health and social work is critical. I need to have that conversation every week with somebody in that space. I need to have that conversation damn near daily with somebody in that space. And if Speaker Arch was not the speaker, I would be requesting that he comes over because he's in that space. It's critical to what we're doing for Judiciary. You all elected me by acclamation to do these things on prison reform. And I'm telling you, I like the committee I got, but I know where I'm missing a link. And I'm missing a link in the mental health and the social work space. I need that, else it makes my job that much harder. So that's my only request of voting this down, or if I file a motion to recommit, is for that. And I was clear about that yesterday to multiple people. I'm not going to get into how it got lost and why it got lost, because that doesn't matter. I'm moving forward, but I need that. And for those who might be concerned about a runaway committee, I will tell you to ask your colleagues Reapy, Brewer, Linehan, Breezy, Lowe, some of your most conservative colleagues, where I walked up to them and said, I don't need your vote. You don't need that. You need to worry about reelection. I need you for bigger things. I don't need your vote. I'm good. Because that's who I am. I understand the politics of this body. I understand how things work. I'm going to tell you when I need you. And sometimes you still may say no. But I also understand that I needed those individuals here for the next term so we can continue the work that we were doing on the committees and the things that we were doing. And at one point, it was a veto override. I actually stood up and was yelling at somebody not to vote because I needed them for 4 more years. I'm transparent with you all. I've made a commitment that I'm not putting out anything crazy that me and Senator Geist don't agree on. And I said that grammatically incorrect. Senator Geist and I don't agree on. Because I know if it comes out with this body on a 5-4 or a 5-3 vote, I got to spend 8 hours on a debate. I don't have time for that this year. My big project of North and South Omaha dollars, that's back before this body, and we're asking for more. We're going to change North and South Omaha through economic development.
One minute,
you guys
Senator.
have tasked me with prison reform and criminal justice reform, and I'm telling you the weak link that I am missing right now in my committee is that space. And I need to have those conversations every day. We are actually about to make an announcement that we're going to have judiciary meet underneath the balcony at about 11 o'clock. So we can start today talking about how we're going to do this. So that's my ask to this body. Vote no on the committee report or vote yes on the recommit. And give me the tools that I need to make this successful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Recognize Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to the motion to approve the Committee on Committees report. And I'm hopeful that there will be a formal motion to recommit to committee as well, and perhaps some other potential motions to be filed this morning to provide for additional debate and deliberation. Let me say at the outset that as a former member of the Committee on Committees, I appreciate and understand that under the best of circumstances, it is a very challenging job to try and balance geographic diversity, personal preferences, seniority, incumbency, and all of the different factors and considerations that go into setting a thoughtful process and that have a thoughtful result. And so I definitely appreciate the committee members who are working hard in that regard to try and balance all of those different factors. But I also want to just take a step back and broaden the conversation for a moment here, help to connect the dots and let people know, why this is important and why it isn't just an inside baseball kind of piece. But the reason why committee assignments matter is because it ensures that we can have better debate and better policy results. So that's why we take into account considerations like your personal or professional background, the needs of your individual district and caucuses, your incumbency or seniority having served on those committees of jurisdictions, which in fact, while, definitely seems to have less importance in today's day and age, it actually should have more in the term limits dynamic. I think that it's really important that we reaffirm those considerations because it helps us to have better policy. It helps us to ensure stronger committees. It helps to ensure that the committees do the hard work to get the legislation ready for prime time when it hits the floor. If we weaken the committees, if we have committees that are out of balance and stacked or cracked or packed, that point to a preconceived result, because we're throwing away tradition, because we're throwing away precedent, that's just going to make things harder on the floor for all of us. And I don't think that that's the result that we want, and it definitely doesn't align with the spirit of working together that Governor Pillen outlined in his inaugural address yesterday. So typically, we haven't had to delineate all of these different factors in specific rules because they have been honored through customs and norm. Apparently, those customs and norms have been put by the wayside to push, I think, a radical partisan agenda. Let's just be candid and clear about it. So in my instance, let me give you an example of that. We've had a handful of senators that have returned to the body after what I call being forced into constitutional retirement or term limited. Incredible, prestigious leaders like Senator Chambers, Senator Flood, Senator Paul, Senator Aguilar, Senator Lathrop, and now myself. In each of those instances, as my understanding, those individual senators' seniority was recognized in this process, and they were afforded their first choice in committee assignments. And so here I stand today as the first woman to return to the body in the post-term limits era, and my first choice of serving on the Appropriations Committee, which I diligently served on for 8 years, was denied by my caucus with no explanation. And not did I just sit back and, say I should be afforded this because of our customs and traditions. I worked in good faith. I called each member of my Committee on Committees caucuses. I talked about my experience. I talked about my perspective. Thank you, Mr. President. And I asked them for due consideration. To their credit, Senator Bostar, Senator Bosselman, and Senator Moser at least had the courtesy to call me back, which I definitely appreciate, and we'll have more to say about that. But I think that we need to really put some sunlight on this process. Sunlight is typically always the best disinfectant. And when we feel like there is something awry, it's good to bring that out into public dialogue and debate. So I'm going to be proposing rule changes to improve this process. But I definitely think that it is beneficial to this body and all members to set the tone and get more information about what this committee report really means for how we move forward in doing our work together. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Recognize Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraskans. I'm excited to begin this new unicameral session with so many new faces in the body. I am excited to work with Senator Conrad, who I have admired in the advocacy work that we've done together for so many years, and it's a great honor to me to be able to serve with her. And listening to her speak about her experience here in the body, serving on the Committee on Committees, serving on the Appropriations Committee for 8 years, she made a lot of really great points and a lot of really well-worded, well-spoken things that she said. And I feel like that's just some energy today that I cannot match. This place is so weird. This place is so partisan, honestly. It's a joke. And all of you who participate in this make this legislature a joke to the entire state. They laugh at us when our speaker stands up and says, if you'd like to take a point of personal privilege, the rules of which are outlined in our rule book, you need to give me a day notice, and it has to be on a positive topic. It has to be on something that makes everybody feel nice. Is this the party of free speech? Is this the anti-cancel culture people that you've all been talking about for the last several years? I was watching this interview with former Governor Pete Ricketts that Martha Stoddard did from the Omaha World Herald, and it went a little bit viral, so maybe some of you saw it too, but she asked him a question in this interview about, what would you say to some of your critics who say that you've used your personal wealth in an inappropriate and unethical way to influence the results of legislative elections? And he replied immediately and confidently and defiantly, "Can you have too much free speech?" A pause. And Martha goes, "Can you?" And this was in the back of my mind as I was listening to Speaker Arch talk about how he's going to be handling points of personal privilege. Points of personal privilege take precedence over every other motion. They are not politicized. They are, sometimes someone says something political, but it doesn't happen so often that we need to crack down on it in this authoritarian way to the extent that this speaker is choosing to do. It's a terrible precedent. It is not free speech. It is treating all of you with complete disrespect, treating all of you like children who need to be managed. And that was my exact experience in the Committee on Committees. All of this belies the entire problem with this legislature right now and what's going on in this body. that people come into a place of power, people come into a place of leadership, they're given trust and responsibility from their colleagues who elected them, and then those leaders use their position to oppress, hold down, exert control on others. I can name many, many examples, and I will over the course of the morning. There was a lot of debate in the committee about if people wanted to make a trade, did they need to talk to all 4 members of the Committee on Committees in the few hours of time that we had? Or do we in the committee end up making the final decision about where everybody goes and we ignore all of these decisions to trade? And then we had different standards for if a registered Democrat and a registered Republican wanted to trade. Thank you, Mr. President. Or if 3 Republicans wanted to trade, that was okay. But if a Democrat got in the mix, then we had to really scrutinize that rule. And I just keep seeing this pattern of reading the rules in the most draconian possible way, instead of working in good faith with our colleagues, treating them like adults who are duly elected by 38, 40, 42,000 people in Nebraska, who pounded the pavement, who went through the ringer, who raised all their little money from Pete Ricketts to get elected and get into the position where they are, where they deserve the respect to make a trade if they want to, where they deserve the respect to make a point of personal privilege if they want to. Speaker Arch, if you think that the points of personal privilege have gone off the rails, you should introduce a rule to change that. You shouldn't come down from on high and say, here's the way I interpret this rule in the most extreme possible way, just as Chairwoman Albright and the Committee on Committees interpreted the rule in the most extreme possible way. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Recognize Senator Michaela Cavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I am not going to support the Committee on Committees report, and I have several things to say about that this morning, but since Senator Hunt brought up the points of personal privilege, I wanted to speak to that. I requested a point of personal privilege yesterday, and I was denied. I went through the process that Speaker Arch outlined in his remarks this morning, and I was denied. I actually wasn't even asked what I was going to speak about. Yesterday was George Norris Day. I was denied to speak about the institution by the speaker presiding in the chair on George Norris Day. I was told to come up to the chair. When you call the chair, that is the equivalent. If you want to talk to me, you can come to me. You had an opportunity to have that conversation with me. I did the courtesy and was denied without even being asked what I was speaking about. I didn't want to make a deal about this yesterday because of the inaugurations. I didn't want to overcast that day. But it is unacceptable. And to Senator Hunt's point, if you want to change the rules, then change the rules. I had every right to take a point of personal privilege yesterday. I had every right to speak about the integrity of this institution, especially on George Norris Day. And it sets a tone, and it's a tone that I do not appreciate. I was very disappointed in how the elections went for chairmanships on our first day. So many unopposed chairmanships. Everything preordained. But I tried to believe and have faith in this institution that we can proceed as a nonpartisan unicameral. And then at the end of the day, Committee on Committees' first report came out. And I was crestfallen because I knew several people's first requests, including my own, as a senator with seniority who has served in this body for 4 years, and I am about to serve 4 additional years. I have waited until a spot in my caucus opened up on appropriations. Senator Robert Hilkeman was term limited off, and he was leaving a spot open on appropriations, a position I have wanted since my freshman year. I put it as my #1 priority and was given to a freshman over me. I don't begrudge the freshmen for getting that seat. They will probably do a wonderful job. I begrudge the process. I read in the paper that people didn't submit their requests early enough. There was no timeline except for before the committee met. And I spoke with my committee members except for one because I didn't have their phone number because, again, we put a freshman on committees, which, not begrudging that freshman, but this is a really big job, and that doesn't seem like the best decision-making that we as a caucus had. Of course, I haven't been in there. He maybe is the most qualified in the room. I don't actually know, so please forgive me, Senator. It's not about you. But the process has not been honored. How much time do I have left?
1:30.
Thank you. I would ask if Senator Holcroft would yield to a question.
Senator Holcroft, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Holcroft. What was your first choice on committees?
Government.
Government was your first choice?
Yes.
And you were moved off of government last night.
Yes.
Was that your choice?
That was an agreement between myself, Senator Slama, and Senator Aguilar.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you so much. So Senator Holcroft made an agreement, and I don't see him right now, so I will get back in the queue, and I'm going to ask Senator Decay some questions on my next go-round. Thank you. I'll yield the remainder of my time for now to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Day, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Excuse me. I am one of the senators who was removed from a committee that I had incumbency on in order to give someone who did not have incumbency a seat on that committee. I was aware that this was going to happen. I was thankfully warned ahead of time, a couple of weeks before this happened, that this was going to be the process. And I hope that everybody in here is listening to this conversation, particularly those of you who are freshmen, because I think one of the things that's lost with term limits is, number one, institutional knowledge of just general subject matter concepts, but also an understanding that this body existed long before you were born, and this place will hopefully exist long after all of us are gone, long after our kids are gone, long after our grandkids are gone. And we don't just have the duty of getting bills passed and doing work of Nebraska people. We have the duty of upholding the norms of the institution itself to ensure that future legislators function properly. And we're not currently doing that. And that's the problem I think that most of us have with what has happened with Committee on Committees and committee leadership. The process was completely thrown out the window in favor of putting specific people with no competition in places of leadership on committees in order to change the makeup of that committee. Sometimes the public doesn't understand how the whole process works. The makeup of the committee is based on who is the chair of that committee. So we have 3 caucuses in the body, roughly based on congressional district, and then each caucus gets a certain set number of seats on that committee based on who is the chairperson for that committee. Some committees have 7 people, some have 8. So it just depends on how the seats fill out depending on who is the chair of that committee. In the previous past 2 sessions, the Education Committee had 3 seats available for the second caucus, from which I am from. I was placed on that committee as a freshman 2 years ago, and I have served on that committee for 2 years. It was my number 1 request to be placed back on the Education Committee this session, and our caucus had 2 seats available. The other senator that had incumbency from our caucus was given 1 seat, and my seat was given to another member of my caucus that did not have incumbency. Again, I was aware of the situation that was happening. I was not happy about it, to be totally honest. I have a job to do, and it doesn't matter to me what committees you put me on. It doesn't stop me from doing my job. If I end up on the 2 alternative committees that I end up on, I have 2 areas of content that I get to spend 2 years understanding so I can contribute more on the floor, which means you're going to hear my voice more often. So hopefully that was your goal. And I get to sit with senators that I haven't sat in committee hearings with before and get to know and forge better relationships with them. So that's an opportunity for me, and I understand that. You don't get to stop me from doing my job because you kicked me off of a committee that I asked to be on. The problem is
One minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we subvert the process, we are not seeing beyond 5 minutes into the future. We are placing personal and political partisan squabbles above the institution of the Nebraska Legislature. And that's the problem that we all have. When people talk about this being done in a fair way, it absolutely was not. The idea that sheets were not turned in until it was too late, we're not in 3rd grade. It doesn't matter in what order the sheets were turned in. In fact, I got kicked off my committee and I turned my sheet in that very night that we elected committee on committee members. So I know that that's not what happened with my seat. The only thing that we're asking for is for the norms of this body.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Recognize Senator John Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Pleasure to see you up there. It's the first time talking this year, and it's much earlier than I spoke in my first session. So welcome to all the new members. This is unique, in my experience, at least, the conversation we're having. And I do want to say I appreciate the work the Committee on Committees did. I understand it's a very difficult job. I understand that there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of interests, and that everybody has what they say they want, and everybody has what they really want. And then there are external interests as well that exert pressure on people. And some people acquiesce in the broader conversation for their, I guess, constituency. And so I understand there's a lot of that complexity, and that's fine. And this is a really hard thing to do. But the question is whether you want the guiding principle to be fairness and objectivity, or whether you want it to be something about what you can do. And there's certainly, the makeup of this body is such that people can do what they want. There are groups of people, coalitions, that can affect the outcomes in whatever way they so choose, if they choose to exert that force. What we're looking at right now, in the way this committee and the processes that have historically been used have been subverted, demonstrates that that is what the nature of this session is going to be. And that will be problematic. I've said in the past, and others have said, that this is a tremendous gift we were given here in the Nebraska Legislature, being a nonpartisan unicameral, and it has functioned for nearly 100 years as such. And we have done great service for the people of the state of Nebraska. And each one of us represents our constituents in our district, but the whole, we are all senators for the state of Nebraska. We are not members of a party when we are here, and we are not acting in that capacity. And so that is creeping into the way we run this place, and has continued to further creep. The problem we face right now is if this is how we're going to behave in every aspect, if we're going to start acting like a partisan body, then things are going to not function in the positive, constructive way they have in the past. I know we have fights, we have arguments, we have disagreements, we all have conflict, and that is supposed to happen. We're supposed to disagree, we're supposed to have that argument and then work toward a compromise, or ultimately, if no compromise can be found, to pursue whichever side prevails. But have those arguments in good faith in the interests of the state of Nebraska. And I think what's happening here and the reason people are upset is not so much that they didn't get their first choice or their second choice or their third choice or their fourth choice. But people are upset because the process was one that was a divergence from historic norms, a divergence from respect for each other and for our constituents. And if that's a sign of things to come, if we're going to continue to divert from the norms and from the respect that we have always shown to each other, and that make us the productive place that we want to be for the constituents, for our constituents, for the members of the state of Nebraska, that is going to be a very bad precedent for this session going forward. And so ultimately, I rise in support of Senator Wayne's motion to recommit. There is this opportunity to fix this one request. I think he made a very fine point, and so I rise in support of what Senator Wayne is asking for, and I would ask you all to consider doing that. I know we can't fix everything that's happened. We can't make everybody happy, but we do have an opportunity to fix at least one thing and to make a positive stride and then build on that stride towards a positive session. And so I would ask you to support Senator Wayne's motion to recommit if he does file one, or to vote no on the committee report so we have the opportunity to make that correction. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Conrad, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, good morning, colleagues. Definitely helpful to hear some of the different perspectives that have been brought forward thus far. And I want to continue on some of the comments that I was talking about before and the need for reform of this process in the term limits era, apparently. And to be clear, this is not a personal venting session in regards to my committee assignments. I am happy to be an active and energetic committee member wherever I am assigned. But I do just want to recognize, just by using my experience as an example, an 8-year diligent member of the Appropriations Committee who put that as their first choice was denied that in terms of committee assignment. So that's just one example. But my good friend, Senator Aguilar, the other senior member who anchors this chamber and who I've always appreciated serving with together, came over to let me know, to correct the record, that he was denied his first committee choice when he returned to the body as well. So it's good to always be in good company with Senator Aguilar. But I do want to note that how disturbing it is to hear the rumblings about this process and how shocking it has been to see this disarray upon return to this proud institution. So I've heard excuses that committee on committee members were not turning in preference sheets. I've also heard that members who were elected to serve on the committee on committees were not able to access or see their own members' preference sheets prior to deliberations. I think it's very disturbing that I'm hearing reports in our caucus and otherwise that committee on committee members were meeting without all committee members present. I think that it is very disturbing and sad to hear words like bullying in regards to committee preferences. I think it is very sad and disappointing to hear that there were continual threats made that we will take it up by the committee as a whole if we do not get things according to plan, because that's not appropriate and that's not the process. And that should not be the type of way that we conduct ourselves to ensure that we have fair committee assignments that help us to achieve better policy again. It's important that we have laws, rules, customs, norms, and traditions to organize chaos, to set clear expectations, to ensure fairness. So with that, I don't know if Senator Bostar is on the floor, but he's a member. Oh, there he is. Senator Bostar, would you yield to a question, please?
Senator Bostar, will you yield?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, Senator Bostart. You had mentioned during the course of this process that as one of our 4 designees in the first Congressional District Caucus, that there had been meetings with the other 3 members that you had not been a part of. Is that accurate?
It's accurate to say that it's
Thank-
my understanding that there were conversations that took place without all the members present.
Okay. Thank
And that
you.
we didn't meet as a group of elected members from the first caucus until session started.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator Bostart. And if Senator Bosselman would please yield to a question.
Senator Bosselman, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Bosselman, I know that you've had a chance to serve on the Committee on Committees before and then are continuing in that role, but tell me in regards to this year's process, when did you start to put together committee preference matrices? When did
1
you
minute.
share those, thank you, Mr. President, with other representatives from our caucus? And who else did you consult with in this process in establishing a plan for the first caucus?
So what I did was took and put a matrix together myself, and everybody received the committee preference sheets with the exception of Senator Bostar, who did not provide one to us. So that was given ahead of time. As soon as I received those went out to all of the Committee on Committee CD1 caucus members. So Senator Bostar, Senator Sanders, Senator Moser, myself, all received those on the same day when I got all those. When they're all in, I sent those to them, so they all had it. So then I took and I put myself a spreadsheet together of where people are and where their choices are and where I felt that they could fit in. And we shared that, and we did not meet as a caucus.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bosselman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman and Senator Conrad. Recognize Senator McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of Senator Wayne's motion to recommit. And I rise because, like last year, I came back to this body optimistic that we could get some things done around criminal justice. And I remain optimistic that we could get some things done because over the interim, I spoke with some colleagues and I was motivated, like, okay, we might could get something done. But after the reports yesterday, my optimism is going down the drain currently. I know a lot of people would like to build a prison, and I'm strongly against it, and I'll always be against it. And one of those reasons is because we really need to make some changes within the criminal justice system in our state. And we cannot build ourselves out of the problem that we have. I don't care how many prisons we build. It's not going to fix the issues that we have horrible laws concerning criminal justice. We're incarcerating way too many people, and too many people are staying inside. The department wants to build this prison because they deferred the maintenance on this prison for forever, all while Director Frakes was the director. It's a problem they created to justify building a prison that doesn't make sense. And we talk about being conservative and investing in a state and doing all these things. If the Department of Corrections was a Fortune 500 business, it would be bankrupt because it's returning nothing on its investment to the state of Nebraska. All the Department of Correction keeps doing is keep coming back asking for more and more money to not do anything but just house individuals and not try to help them become successful individuals after they are released. Because contrary to popular belief, 90+% of the individuals that are currently incarcerated will be released in our state. And we can either choose to help them while we have them inside, or we can not help them and continue to have a problem and having to spend millions and millions of dollars housing them instead of investing millions and millions of dollars in them so they could assist with property taxes, assist with all the things many people stand up and argue about today. And one of the reasons we need to look at Senator Frederickson is mental health. A lot of individuals inside, men and women, deal with mental health issues, especially when you're incarcerated for so long and not being treated properly by the Department of Punitive Services. we need to have somebody that could look at legislation from a mental health perspective that would be very helpful for our body and our state. And we have to keep that in mind. This is not against anybody else, nothing like that. We just need to make sure we have a committee that can look at criminal justice issues from all angles so we can make the proper decisions pertaining to criminal justice reform in this state. Because if you guys are just going to come up and try to push money to build a prison, I'm going to camp out with a tent and fight y'all tooth and nail because it doesn't make sense. We can't build something and not pass reforms. Nothing in any study that has ever been shown says that building prisons are the solution. We're probably one, if only two states in the country that are trying to build prisons. Everybody else is going the opposite direction. Why are we still thinking that just locking people up is going to solve a problem? We've been practicing this philosophy my whole lifetime, and all I see is a bunch of my friends and family inside of prisons, and my community still impoverished. Thankfully, we got some money last year to start working on those changes to improve the economic conditions, but we still need to change policy. And we cannot change policy if we don't have people on the committee in charge of looking at policy that doesn't have someone that can look at it from a mental health perspective. That is very much needed because a lot of the men and women that we are incarcerating are dealing with mental health issues, and we need somebody that can look at it to give us the proper guidance as far as addressing those needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Mr. Clerk for new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 106, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to offenses, amend sections 28-341 and section 28-101. Prohibits the using of an electronic device or social media to engage in certain conduct with vulnerable adults. Defines the term harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 107, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to offenses, amends several sections. Prohibits using an electronic communication device or social media to engage in certain conduct with minors. Defines terms, requires registration under the Sex Offender Registration Act. Harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 108, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. Provides for the allocation of certain appropriations to the Department of Health and Human Services and provides for a grant program. Legislative Bill 109, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to counties. Amend sections 23-2802, changes provisions relating to county boards of corrections in certain counties. Harmonized provisions and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 110, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to criminal procedure. Amends section 29-901, changes provisions relating to bail, provides for a pilot project relating to pretrial risk assessment services, provides duties for the state court administrator, states intent regarding appropriations, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 111, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to state government, adopts the Nebraska Volunteer Service Commission Act, provides an operative date and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 112, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. States intent regarding appropriations to the Department of Health and Human Services, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 113, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. States intent regarding the appropriations of the Department of Economic Development and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 114, introduced by Senator Vargas and others, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. States legislative intent to appropriate money to the Department of Health and Human Services for evidence-based early intervention home visitation programs. Legislative Bill 115, introduced by Senator Raybold and others, is a bill for an act relating to family home visits, adopts the Family Home Visitation Act. Legislative Bill 116, introduced by Senator Brandt and others, is a bill for an act relating to the Beginning Farmer Credit Act, amends several sections within Chapter 77, redefines the term, changes the selection of criterion for the Beginning Farmer Board, changes provisions relating to beginning farmer or livestock producer qualifications, program participation and rental agreement review, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 117, introduced by Senator Brandt, is a bill for an act relating to Nebraska meat and poultry inspection law. Amends sections 54, 19, 1502, changes an applicant eligibility standard under the Independent Processor Assistance Program, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 118, introduced by Senator Brandt and others, is a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Advantage Rural Development Act. Amends several sections, Chapter 777, changes provisions relating to the application fee and qualifying investment amount for a tax credit, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 119, introduced by Senator Bosselman, is a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Broadband Bridge Act. Amends section 86-1302, redefines the term and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 120, introduced by Senator Bosselman, is a bill for an act relating to public power, eliminates obsolete provisions relating to Nebraska Power Review Board, study of state, regional, and national electronic transfer infrastructure, and outright repeals several sections in Chapter 70. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Clerk for a motion.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to recommit the committee report to the Committee on Committees.
Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open.
Thank you. Well, it's open now. I just wanted to update. I wanted to hop the line just so when you file a motion, you can hop the queue. And part of it is, everyone, is just in order to have a trade, there have to be two willing people to trade. For whatever reason, there aren't two willing people on judiciary to trade at this point. I'm gonna leave it at that. It doesn't matter how we got there. I'm not in the business of trying to figure out how we got there. I got to move forward. And so at this point, the floor debate can continue on whatever it wants to continue on, but the idea of Frederickson coming to judiciary, that's not happening. There isn't a trade. So I'm going to withdraw this motion, Mr. President, when I'm done speaking, because I just wanted to give an update that the trade's not there. There is two people are needed to trade. It's not there. So we are going to move forward. And so Judiciary Committee, we will be meeting upon adjournment in the underneath the north balcony because we got a lot of work to do. Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Mr. Clerk for another motion.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to recommit the Committee on Committee report to the Committee on Committees.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh to open.
Thank you. And I have 10 minutes, Mr. President, correct?
Yes, 10.
Thank you. There is a trade, Senator Wayne, actually. I just spoke with my colleague and row-mate, Senator Frederickson, about trading my seat on HHS for his seat on natural resources. He had prioritized HHS, and as a freshman senator, I think it is important to give him that opportunity to be on that committee and learn, because that committee requires a great deal of institutional knowledge. And right now we have a wonderful senior senator, not senior citizen, senior senator, who will be term limited out in 2 years. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for Senator Frederickson to learn from Senator Walz and Senator Day and Senator Hansen, and we have a returning Senator Reapy on that committee. And so I would like to offer that opportunity. And I'm happy to take a seat on natural resources. Instead, I would comment that I don't believe that the other Senator Cavanaugh is thrilled to sit with me on natural resources, but such is his lot in life. So this motion to recommit is in hopes that we can send the committee report back to the Committee on Committees so that we can make that trade. I believe that there are other trades that still people would desire to have made. And I hope that this gives everyone else that extra opportunity to discuss with your colleagues about how we can better situate our committees. I continue to be disappointed in how this all shook out. And I did read through the article that quoted some of the committee members yesterday. One of the quotes, well, I guess it's not a direct quote, is that most of the outrage on Thursday came from senators, all Democrats, who did not submit their preference to the committee in time. I wonder if Senator Albright would yield to a question.
Senator Albright, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Albright. What does that mean?
What does what mean?
That people didn't submit their preferences to the committee in time. Did no one submit their preferences before you met on
I understand
Wednesday?
there were 5 members of Caucus 2 that did not submit their information so that the committee could convene and
Caucus
start
2 did not have a time deadline beyond before the Committee on Committees met.
I did not know that.
Okay. Well, were you told otherwise?
They just didn't hand them in, so they couldn't start working on it. So we went
So
through the
you made a
preliminary
comment
with-
that we didn't hand them in on time, but you don't know what on time was.
Well, why would somebody wait until the night. that
I
we were
waited
going to meet.
because I was trying to talk to my committee members, trying to get a hold of them over the holidays, played phone tag several times with Senator Linehan, which I appreciate her taking time out of her holiday, but I wanted to speak with her before I put anything into writing. So that's why mine came at the end. But
I'm
there
sure
wasn't a
everyone-
deadline that I missed.
I'm sure everyone has their reasons, but it kind of delays the whole process.
But there's not a
getting this.
timeline. We
Well,
didn't
but
miss a deadline.
There is for the caucus. There is.
There is for the caucus, yes, and nobody missed that deadline, correct?
It was the day before.
As far as I understand, you had all of the commitments before the Committee on Committees met.
The day before. Most of them had them.
There's no written deadline, there's no rules of a deadline, there was
That's
no
right.
informal deadline for caucus 2. And you're arguing that there was, even though you're not a part of caucus 2, and there wasn't.
I'm not arguing anything. I'm simply saying that there was a delay in one of the caucuses, 5
Thank you.
members.
Okay, so there was a delay in a caucus because some of us wanted to make sure that we had those conversations with our committee on committee members for our caucus that weren't elected until December 19th. And so between December 19th, Christmas and New Year's, we didn't have a whole lot of time to meet or talk with our committee on committee members who have their own families and holidays, and we have our own families and holidays. And I did get my sheet in before Committee on Committees met. I did also let everyone know what I was intending to put down. So if they were having informal conversations about what our Committee on Committees caucus was going to do, they had an inkling as to what I was going to indicate. This isn't a race to submit your form first. That's not how this works. There's no arbitrary deadline for our caucus. There wasn't one put in writing. There wasn't one voted on. This has not been handled well. And I think we've heard from several members this morning about what this is indicating to not only this legislature, but the state of Nebraska. This is hyper-partisan politics at its absolute worst. This is the bottom of the bottom. And these committees, the way that they are made up, is really important because sometimes there's some legislation that somebody wants to get out really badly from a committee, and it's just not ready. And when you have a balanced committee, you get to have robust conversations in executive session and talk about whether or not it's a good idea to put that to the floor as it is now, or to hold it and work with the senator, see if they can bring a substantive amendment even, and especially in year 1 of a 2-year biennium, bring a substantive amendment, have a second hearing on that amendment, which we have done lots of times, and then kick it out to the floor so that you have a good, strong public policy. The committees we have now are literally set up so that every red meat bill just comes to the floor and it is a literal bloodbath. If that's the session you all want to have, congratulations. That's the session you're going to have. This is going to be the least constructive legislature in recent history. If these committees are how they are, you're going to have every single bill that is whimsical and fanciful from the lobby, everything people have been trying to get out of a committee for decades, but couldn't because the committees were set up sensibly with all kinds of viewpoints on them. But now they're all going to come to the floor and we're going to get to live out what we normally live out in executive session on the floor every single day. In HHS, the 4 years that I've served on there has never been a majority of Democrats. It has always been a majority of Republicans, but it has been varied. It has been varied views, varied stances on all the issues. And we have sent out of that committee very few bills that didn't pass In 4 years, I can't even tell you a bill that didn't pass that came out of HHS, because we have been purposeful and diligent in our conversations in executive session. I also sit on transportation and telecommunications, where there have in my 4 years been 2 Democrats on that committee. And we have had robust conversations in that committee, and we have had varied viewpoints. We have had the urban-rural divide and transportation and telecommunications. It's important. Now we have 4 people from my caucus on judiciary. So that means we've swapped other districts that don't have representation on judiciary. We've swapped. District 3 only has 1 senator on HHS. So you're losing a voice. Not only are you putting together committees that are going to kick out all the red meat bills, but you're also losing a voice. Your caucus is losing voices on these committees. We were told by Senator Linehan at our caucus meeting that she was going to oppose these significant changes where there's an underrepresentation of caucuses on committees. I don't see that bearing out today in the fact that she voted for a 4th member of our caucus to be put on judiciary yesterday. What you say to one another matters. You are only as good as your word. And I, of course, have learned who in this body is not good at their word and who is. And I operate in that space. And one thing everyone should know about me is that I am 100% transparent 100% of the time. If you want to talk to me about anything, I'm here. I'm happy to discuss what my plans are. If you burn a bridge with me, I probably will avoid you, but I'll still talk to you if you come find me.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Recognize Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, especially new colleagues, you are debasing yourself if you allow somebody else in this body to tell you what committees to run for, how to vote for your caucus leadership. You're debasing the people who elected you, and you're debasing the legislature's integrity as an institution, because the legislature is everybody's joke and nobody takes it seriously because of the way we act so foolishly, the way we are now, that they can see on TV, that they can read about in the newspaper. Your rules should be what you follow. You can change the rules, and then we all agree to follow those rules. And you know that what's happening right now, the way the caucuses were put together, the way the committees were made up, the way the Committee on Committees was run, none of that was done in the interest of the integrity of the legislature or the dignity of the legislature. This is undercutting it for the sake of a political party. So have some dignity. Have some status and some pride that's recognized by the public that you're here in this office. When we walk around, everybody's going to call you Senator. Everyone's going to say, "Oh, Senator, good to see you. I've got some bills to talk to you about." You're everybody's best friend until you're out of here. But look at how the public really talks about us. We've earned all of that by the way we behave. In completely good faith, I'll give you guys some real talk. This is my packet for Committee on Committees. In the past, when I've served on Committee on Committees, I've run through many, many scenarios. I totally understand how the process works. I have spoken to members of several parties in the past who have been on Committee on Committees to have them mentor me and help me understand the best practices, the best procedures to follow, that we first go on incumbency on when we place people on their committees, so we don't kick people off their committees. Then we go on seniority, so if someone's been here longer, they get to have more of their first choice. And then we go on preference. And members of each caucus meet at some point that typically, traditionally, the senior members of that caucus select the date and time that they're going to meet. Frequently, CD3 meets at our legislative council, typically in November. This year they met, right before we started session. Typically, CD1 and CD2 meet around the same time, sometime in December. And that's been the tradition for many, many years back. And at this caucus meeting, senior members of the caucus hand out a preference sheet to every member of the caucus. And then the preference sheet has a list of everybody, of all the different committees that we have, and then we ask them to rate the committees in the order that they would prefer. I have in the past 4 years served on government committee, government, military, and veterans affairs, urban affairs, and business and labor. Those are committees that weren't my first choice when I came in here as a freshman, but over the years I've really become very familiar with that subject matter, and I have a lot of passion for some of those issues, especially as a business owner. And so, you know, this is a great place for me. So I prioritized those 1, 2, 3. I wanted to stay on my same committees. I have the seniority and the incumbency, and I put them as my preferences. Real talk, you guys, I have the preference sheets from our caucus here. They're all here in my packet. They were distributed to us by Senator Vargas, one of the senior members of our caucus, on a Google Drive. This is the thing I want you guys to understand in good faith. I think some members of our caucus had some trouble accessing the technology. I think we might have had a generational, whatever reason, technology barrier. I printed these preference sheets off of the Google Drive. I used them to play out all of my different scenarios. And I came up with a scenario where nobody was kicked off their committee, where everybody got their first, second, or third choice, and where we respected seniority. In the past, in a normal legislature, of colleagues that actually respect each other and have pride in the work that they're doing and are acting normal and not like they're in a little country club where they're all me against you all the time, that is the type of plan that we would have adopted. But you have debased yourselves by allowing people in bad faith to tell you how things run around here, and they are not telling you the truth. Not everybody in this body is your friend. You're going to make some friends, and that's going to be very rare and important. But you need to understand that power takes everything it can get. And there are people here who are going to take you for a ride. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Mosier, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I served on the committee on committees, and it's a difficult process, and it's not purely technical. It's not purely based on seniority from both parties. Both parties jockey to try to get control of committees that they're interested in. It's why there's a committee on committees. Otherwise, we could just turn in our preferences and our experience to the clerk's office, and they could build a matrix and assign everybody to committees mathematically. But there are some political considerations. You can look at the makeup of committees and see that. There have been committees that were dominated by Democrats, and there are 17 out of 49. They're about 33% of the senators here, and they had majorities on committees in the past. Or you look at agriculture, which has almost all Republicans on it. And those things weren't accidental, I don't think. It's a difficult process. I support the work of the Committee on Committees. I think we should approve the report and move on. We can talk about this however long they want, but I don't think it's going to change anything. It's never going to be, if you reopen it, then there could be more people that want to switch committees. I never got my first choices when I first came here 4 years ago. I wound up on committees where there were openings. Sometimes there are no openings on the committees that you want to be, and we've, for the most part, not bounced people from committees. I know it has happened in the past. 4 years ago, I know it did, or 6 years ago, I know it did. But those exceptions are all to be considered by Committee on Committees. We give each caucus the permission or the authority to decide what committees their members of their caucus want to be on, and we try to honor that. And, you know, when they turned in their sheets or they didn't turn in their sheet, that's all political jockeying. That's all baloney. You know, they don't like the results and they want to reopen it. And and make everything reconsidered. I think it's a mistake. I think we should honor the work of the Committee on Committees and approve the report and get busy with the business that we have to do here in the legislature. I would give the rest of my time to the speaker for a few comments.
Yielded 2 minutes and 10 seconds, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moser. I certainly rise in opposition to the recommit to committee motion. I do not support that. I appreciate some of the comments that have been made, recognition of complexity of this process, but my commitment from the beginning was that the process be followed. As I heard Senator Albright present this morning, and as I was watching the process, that process was followed. The votes were taken. It is caucus driven. Sometimes our issues are not with the Committee on Committees, but rather the caucus in which we sit. I think Senator Moser said he did not receive his choice. When I was a freshman senator, I did not receive my choice. I asked for HHS, which I received. I wanted banking and insurance as my second because of the compatibility of health insurance issues with the HHS committee. That's where I wanted to be. And the Committee on Committees went and met, and Senator Lathrop came to me at the time and said, "I'm sorry, there wasn't any way to get you onto that committee." Okay. That was my response. Okay. I went to urban and I went to general. That's where I sat for my Monday and Tuesday for the last 4 years. Okay. I mean, there is complexity. We don't always get the choice. Votes are taken in that process. That's how these choices are made. Votes are taken. And so my concern was that a process be followed. Not necessarily the outcome, but that a process be followed, and I believe it was. Now, I will tell you that I have submitted a motion to adjourn for the day. We'll pick this back up on Monday. I hope we can find some resolution to this, meaning that the committee process was followed and we accept the report. That's what I would like to see on Monday. We'll see. I know that there's disagreement with what that committee report is, but that's what I would like to see on Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clerk from items for the record.
First of all, Mr. President, new bills. Legislative Bill 121, introduced by Senator Bosman's bill for enacting the game and parks, amend several sections, Chapter 37, change provisions relating to the National Trail System Act, Cowboy Trail Fund, repeals the Trail Development Assistance Act, harmonize provisions, repeals the original section, outright repeals several sections, Chapter 37. Legislative Bill 122, introduced by Senator Bosman, bill for enacting the One Call Notification System Act, amend Section 81, 50203, and several other sections. Defines the term, creates the Underground Excavation Safety Committee, provides powers and duties for the committee and the state fire marshal, changes civil penalty procedures, provides for the continuing education as prescribed, provides an appeal exception, eliminates an annual report requirement, harmonized provisions, provides an offer of debate, and repeals the original section. Now outright repeals Section 76, 23, 2502. Legislative Bill 123, introduced by Senator Frederickson, is bill for enacting into public health and welfare, amend sections 31-101, 38-121, 38-12902, 131, 167, 186, adopts the Behavior Analyst Practice Act, harmonized provision, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 124, introduced by Senator Moser, is bill for enacting the County Bridge Match Program, amend section 39, 2805, change termination date, eliminates obsolete provisions, repeals the original section, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 125, introduced by Senator Bosman, is bill for enacting the irrigation districts, amend sections 46, 164, change provisions related to the surface water irrigation infrastructure fund, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 126, introduced by Senator Day, is bill for enacting the revenue and taxation, amend section 773506, change provisions relating to homestead exemptions for certain disabled veterans and surviving spouses as prescribed, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 127, introduced by Senator Day and others, is bill for enacting the crimes and offenses, amend several sections, change provisions relating to sentences of certain offenses committed by persons under 18 years of age, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 128, introduced by Senator Dorn, is bill for enacting appropriations, states intent regarding appropriations for certain Medicaid services, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 129, introduced by Senator Dorn, is bill for enacting appropriations, states intent regarding appropriations for Medicaid nursing facilities, and reports by the Department of Health and Human Services regarding appropriations for Medicaid nursing facilities. Legislative Bill 130, introduced by Senator Dorn, is bill for enact relating to the Department of Health and Human Services creates the Medicaid Nursing Facility Services Program. Legislative Bill 131, introduced by Senator Dorn, is a bill for enacting relating to appropriations, states intent regarding appropriations for Medicaid assisted living facilities to the Department of Health and Human Services. Legislative Bill 132, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh, is a bill for enacting relating to commerce, adopts the Automatic Renewal Limitation Act. Legislative Bill 133, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh, is a bill for enacting relating to Open Meetings Act, amends sections 84, 1409, redefines the term, provides for the entities exercising the power of eminent domain or public body subject to the Open Meetings Act and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 134, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh, is a bill for enacting relating to the Small Wireless Facilities Development Act, amends section 86, 1236, and provides a duty for the authority and requirements of wireless providers as prescribed and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 135, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh, is a bill for enacting relating to juveniles, prohibits the use of deception in questioning juveniles, prohibits admission of certain evidence, and defines a term. Legislative Bill 136, introduced by Senator Geist, is a bill for enacting relating to motor vehicles, amends section 61, several sections of Chapter 60, change provisions relating to Motor Vehicle Certificate Title Act, the Motor Vehicle Registration Act, and the Motor Vehicle Operators License Act is prescribed and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 137, introduced by Senator Geist, a bill for enacting the Uniform Controlled Substance Act, amends section 28416, provides a penalty enhancement for a controlled substance violation resulting in serious bodily injury or death, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 137, introduced by Senator Geist, is a bill for an act relating to motor vehicles, amend several sections in Chapter 60 and 75, adopts updates to the federal law and update certain federal references, change provisions to the motor vehicle operator's license as prescribed, changes certain civil penalties, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 139, introduced by Senator Brandt, is a bill for an act relating to the Small Claims Court, amends section 252802. It changes the jurisdictional amount, provides an operative date, repeals the original section, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 140, introduced by Senator Brandt, is a bill for an act relating to motor vehicle registration, amends several sections within Chapter 60, provides for check heritage plates, provides powers, duties, harmonized provisions, provides an operative date, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 141, introduced by Senator Breezy, is a bill for an act relating to schools, provides for a moment of silence in public schools as prescribed, and provides a duty to the State Department of Education. Legislative Bill 142, introduced by Senator Brandt Breezy, is a bill for an act relating to insurance, limit the cost of prescription insulin drugs. Legislative Bill 143, introduced by Senator Breezy and others, is a bill for an act related to time, amend several sections in Chapter 49 and 81, Section 32908, 81, 1328, provides for a year-round daylight savings as prescribed, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 144, introduced by Senator Brandt, is a bill for an act relating to the State Electrical Act, amend several sections, Chapter 81, change and eliminate certain classes of licenses under the State Electrical Act, change provisions relating to eligibility for licensure, continuing education and training, changes fees, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, outright repeals Section 81, 2110. Legislative Bill 145, introduced by Senator Bostar, is a bill for an act relating to insurance, amends sections 44785, changes provisions relating to coverage for screening of mammography and breast examinations, and repeals the original section. Legislative LR 8, introduced by Senator Decay, congratulating the Harding and Cedar Catholic Trojans volleyball team. Legislative LR 9 from Senator Decay, LR 10 from Senator Decay, LR 11 from Senator Decay, LR 12 from Senator Decay, and LR 13 from Senator Decay. Supporting action to include the names of the Sage brothers and the other 71 sailors in the USS Frank E. Collins killed on January 3rd, 1969. Those will all be laid over. LR 14CA, introduced by Senator Breezy. Constitutional amendment providing for the recall of the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, state treasurer, attorney general, auditor of public accounts, and members of the legislature. Finally, Mr. President, series of name adds. Senator Raybold, name added to LB 15, Senator Day to LB 39. Announcements, the reference committee will meet in room 1525 upon adjournment, referencing 1525 upon adjournment. Additionally, the Judiciary Committee will meet under the north balcony upon adjournment. Judiciary Committee, north balcony upon adjournment. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Speaker Arch would move to adjourn the body until Monday, January 9th, 2023 at 10 o'clock a.m.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.